They said I was dead. The doctors, my family, everyone gathered around my hospital bed in Denver. General believed my heart had stopped beating forever. But here's the thing nobody knew. I could hear every single word they whispered about dividing my inheritance, about who would get my house, about how, finally, they could move on with their lives. My name is Charlotte. I'm 34 years old, and this is the moment that changed everything I thought I knew about the people I loved. The steady beeping of machines filled the sterile room as I lay motionless, trapped in what the medical team called a vegetative state. But my mind was crystal clear, absorbing every cruel detail of their conversations. If you're watching this from your city right now, let me know in the comments where you're from. Because what I'm about to tell you might happen in any family, anywhere in the world. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to hear how this incredible story unfolds. She's been like this for 6 months, my sister Jessica said, her voice carrying that false sympathy I'd grown to recognize even in my current state. The doctors say there's no brain activity. Maybe it's time we talked about arrangements. Arrangements. The word hit me like a freight train. Through my closed eyelids, I could sense the autumn sunlight streaming through the hospital window, casting long shadows across the room where my family had gathered to discuss my fate. The October air in Denver carried that crisp bite that always reminded me of new beginnings, but today it felt like an ending. My mother's voice cracked as she spoke. Charlotte always said she wanted to be cremated. But first, we need to think about her assets. The restaurant, the house in Cherry Creek, her savings account. The restaurant, my life's work. I had built Charlotte's kitchen from nothing, working 16-hour days, pouring every dollar I earned back into creating something beautiful. The smell of fresh herbs and simmering sauces had been my world, and now they were dividing it up like pieces of a puzzle. I think I should take over the restaurant, my brother Michael interjected, his voice carrying that familiar edge of entitlement. I have experience in business management. Business management. He sold insurance and had never so much as boiled water without burning it. But there he was, sitting in that uncomfortable hospital chair, plotting how to claim what I had built with my own hands. The machines around me continued their rhythmic symphony, but inside my paralyzed body, rage was building like a storm system over the Rocky Mountains. I wanted to scream, to sit up, to tell them all exactly what I thought of their arrangements. Instead, I lay there, a prisoner in my own flesh, forced to listen as they dissected my life. "What about David?" my mother asked, referring to my ex-husband. "Doesn't he have any claim to the restaurant? They were married for 8 years. Jessica's laugh was bitter. "Mom, they've been divorced for 2 years. Besides, he's the one who cheated with that girl from his law firm. Charlotte made sure he got nothing in the divorce settlement." That was true. David had betrayed me in the worst possible way, and I had fought tooth and nail to keep everything I had worked for. The memory of finding those text messages, of confronting him, of the way he looked at me like I was just an obstacle to his happiness. It all came flooding back as I lay there helpless. "Still," Michael said, "we should be careful. Legal challenges could tie up everything for years. I say we wait until after the funeral, then move quickly on the paperwork." Funeral. They were planning my funeral while I could hear every word. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, mixing with the sound of my own breathing machine, creating a haunting soundtrack to what felt like my own living nightmare. As the hours passed, more family members drifted in and out of my room. Aunt Margaret brought flowers, lilies, which I had always hated. Cousin Daniel talked about how the restaurant's location would be perfect for his used car business. Each conversation drove home the devastating reality. Not one of them believed I would ever wake up. And worse, some of them seemed relieved by that possibility. The night nurse, a kind woman named Grace, would come in every few hours to check my vitals. She was the only one who talked to me like I was still a person, not just a collection of assets waiting to be distributed. "Good evening, Charlotte," she would whisper as she adjusted my pillows. "The sunset was beautiful tonight. Your favorite kind of evening, I bet, perfect for sitting on that porch you told me about." She remembered. Somehow, in the fog of my condition, I had managed to communicate with Grace about my little house with the wraparound porch where I used to sit with my morning coffee, watching Denver wake up. She was the only one who seemed to believe that somewhere inside this broken body, I was still fighting. But my family saw only dollar signs and opportunities. As I drifted between consciousness and the strange twilight of my condition, I began to formulate a plan. If I ever found a way out of this prison, I would make sure they understood exactly what they had revealed about themselves in these dark hours. The last thing I heard before slipping into the deepest part of my comatose state was Jessica on the phone with someone, discussing funeral homes and memorial services. Her voice carried across the room like a death sentence, but inside my still heart, something else was stirring. The fierce determination that had built my restaurant, that had survived my divorce, that had carried me through every challenge life had thrown my way. They thought Charlotte was dead, but Charlotte was just getting started. 3 weeks later, something impossible happened. My eyes opened. Not the slow flutter that movies show you, but a sudden, startling awareness that had the morning nurse dropping her clipboard in shock. The first face I saw clearly was Dr. Martinez, a neurologist who had been monitoring my case since the beginning. "Charlotte, can you hear me?" His voice was gentle but filled with scientific curiosity. Behind him, I could see the familiar walls of my room in Denver General, but everything looked different now. Sharper, more real than the shadowy impressions I'd been collecting for months. I tried to speak, but my throat felt like sandpaper. The breathing tube had been removed days earlier when they thought I was stable enough, but my voice was barely a whisper. "Water," I managed to croak. The transformation in the hospital was immediate. Suddenly, I went from a terminal patient to a medical miracle. Dr. Martinez explained that what I had experienced was an extremely rare condition called locked-in syndrome. My brain had been fully functional, but I couldn't move or communicate. The fact that I had recovered was unprecedented. But as nurses bustled around me, checking vitals and adjusting medications, I was thinking about something else entirely: revenge. Every conversation I had overheard, every cruel plan they had made while standing over what they thought was my deathbed, I remembered it all with perfect clarity. "We need to call your family," Dr. Martinez said, reaching for his phone. "They'll be so relieved." "Wait," I whispered, my voice growing stronger with each word. "Not yet. I need to understand what happened to me first." Over the next 2 days, I worked with physical therapists to regain my strength. My muscles had atrophied, but my determination was stronger than ever. I convinced the medical team to keep my recovery quiet for just a little while longer, claiming I needed time to process the trauma. In reality, I was planning. From my hospital bed, I made phone calls using a burner phone that Grace had helped me acquire. I called my lawyer, Jonathan Wright, who nearly had a heart attack when he heard my voice. "Charlotte? Jesus Christ, we had your will probated last week. Your family said you had died." "My family lied," I said simply. "I need you to do exactly what I tell you, and I need you to do it quietly." The next call was to my restaurant manager, Isabella, who had been running Charlotte's kitchen in my absence. She cried when she heard my voice, telling me how Jessica had already started making changes to the menu and talking about selling the building. "Don't let them change anything else," I instructed. "And Isabella, don't tell anyone I called." "Not yet." The third call was the most important. I contacted a private investigator named Marcus Thompson, someone Jonathan had recommended for discreet family matters. I gave him a simple assignment: document everything my family was doing with my assets and find out exactly how far their deception had gone. Marcus worked fast. Within 48 hours, he had uncovered a web of lies that made my stomach turn. Not only had Jessica filed falsified death certificates, but she and Michael had been systematically draining my business accounts for weeks. They had sold my car, put my house on the market, and even pawned the jewelry I kept in my bedroom safe. But the worst discovery was yet to come. Marcus found out that my ex-husband David hadn't just happened to show up at the hospital that day. He had been in contact with Jessica all along, and they had been planning to challenge any will I might have left behind. The three of them had formed an unholy alliance, united by greed and the belief that I would never wake up to stop them. As I sat in my hospital bed, reading Marcus's report by the light of the Denver skyline, I felt something I had never experienced before: complete clarity about who my family really was. The sister who had held my hand during my divorce was the same person who had filed fake death certificates. The brother who had helped me paint my restaurant was the same one who had been systematically stealing from my accounts. "You're looking better every day," Grace said, as she came in for her evening rounds. "Are you ready to see your family yet? They've been calling non-stop. I looked at her kind face and made my decision. Actually, Grace, I think it's time I paid them a visit instead. The next morning, I discharged myself against medical advice. I was weak, but I was mobile, and I had a plan that had been brewing in my mind for days. With Marcus's help, I arranged for transportation and headed to the place where this whole nightmare had started, the reading of my last will and testament at Jonathan's law office. According to Marcus's intelligence, my family had scheduled a meeting with Jonathan for that very afternoon to finalize the distribution of my estate. They thought they were gathering to claim their inheritance. Instead, they were about to face the ghost of their own greed. As I sat in the back of Marcus's car, watching the familiar streets of Denver pass by, I thought about all the years I had spent trying to maintain relationships with people who saw me only as a source of money. The restaurant I had built, the house I had bought, the savings I had accumulated through years of sacrifice, none of it had been enough to earn their genuine love or loyalty. But today, they were going to learn that Charlotte wasn't just back from the dead. She was back with a vengeance. I asked Marcus to drop me off a block away from the law office. I wanted to walk in on my own, to see their faces when they realized that their carefully laid plans had just turned to ash. The October air in Denver was crisp and clean, filling my lungs with the kind of clarity I hadn't felt in months. As I approached the building where Jonathan's office was located, I could see through the large windows that my family was already there. Jessica sat at the conference table wearing a black dress, mourning attire that looked more like a costume. Michael was reviewing documents with the focused attention of a man counting money. My mother sat quietly in the corner, looking older and more frail than I remembered. I paused at the building's entrance, taking one last moment to appreciate the irony of the situation. They had gathered to bury me, but instead, they were about to bury themselves. The elevator ride to the third floor felt like ascending to a stage where I was about to give the performance of my lifetime. As the doors opened, I could hear their voices drifting down the hallway, discussing logistics and timelines with the casual efficiency of people who believed they had gotten away with something terrible. I walked slowly toward Jonathan's office, my footsteps silent on the carpeted floor. Through the partially open door, I could see Jessica signing papers while Michael looked over her shoulder. The scene looked exactly like what it was, a family dividing up the spoils of someone they thought was dead. I reached for the door handle, took a deep breath, and prepared to deliver the shock of their lives. Let me know in the comments what city you're watching from, because what happened next is something that could change any family forever. Make sure you're subscribed, because the final chapter of this story will blow your mind. I opened the door and walked into Jonathan's office like I was returning from the dead, which in a way I was. The silence that fell over the room was so complete that I could hear the hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of Denver traffic far below. Jessica's pen fell from her hand and clattered onto the conference table. Michael's face went completely white, as if he had seen an actual ghost. My mother gasped so loudly that Jonathan's secretary came running from the outer office to see what had happened. "Hello, family," I said, my voice steady, despite the tremor of adrenaline running through my entire body. "Don't mind me. Please, continue with whatever you were doing." The document spread across the table told the whole story. Asset transfer forms, death certificates, insurance claims, and what appeared to be a contract selling my restaurant to a development company. They hadn't just been planning to inherit my life. They had already started dismantling it piece by piece. "Charlotte," Jessica stammered, standing up so quickly that her chair fell backward. "Oh my God, Charlotte, you're awake. You thought I was dead," I finished for her. "Yes, I know exactly what you thought. I also know exactly what you've been doing while you thought I couldn't hear you." Jonathan, my lawyer, was the first to recover from the shock. He had known about my recovery, of course, but seeing the family's reaction confirmed everything we had suspected about their actions during my comatose state. "Perhaps we should all sit down," he suggested diplomatically. "There are clearly some things that need to be discussed." Michael found his voice first. "Charlotte, listen. We can explain everything. We were just trying to protect your assets. We thought you were gone, and we wanted to make sure everything was handled properly." I walked slowly around the conference table, letting my fingers trail across the documents they had been signing. Insurance fraud, identity theft, embezzlement. The papers were a roadmap of their betrayal, each signature a testament to how quickly they had written me off. Protect my assets? I repeated, picking up a bank transfer form that showed them moving $50,000 from my business account into Jessica's personal savings. Is that what you call this? My mother finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Sweetheart, we never meant for any of this to happen. The doctor said you were brain dead. We thought we were doing what you would have wanted. The lie was so smooth, so practiced, that I almost admired the audacity of it. But I had spent months listening to their real conversations, their genuine feelings about my condition, and their plans for my money. What I would have wanted, I said, settling into the chair at the head of the conference table, was for my family to believe I might recover. What I would have wanted was for you to hold on to hope. What I would have wanted was for you to act like you loved me, instead of like I was an inconvenience you couldn't wait to bury. The room fell silent again. Outside the window, I could see the Denver skyline stretching toward the mountains, the same view I had loved from my restaurant's dining room. It was a reminder of everything I had built, everything they had tried to take away. But you know what I actually heard? I continued, my voice growing stronger. I heard Jessica on the phone with David, planning how to contest any will that didn't benefit you. I heard Michael calculating how much the restaurant property was worth if you sold it to developers. I heard you, Mom, discussing whether cremation would be cheaper than burial. Each accusation hit them like a physical blow. Jessica sank back into her chair, tears streaming down her face. Michael stared at the table as if the wood grain held answers to questions he couldn't bring himself to ask. My mother covered her face with her hands. The most heartbreaking part, I said, standing up and walking to the window, wasn't that you gave up on me. It was how quickly you did it, and how excited you seemed about the possibilities. Jonathan cleared his throat. Charlotte, what would you like to do about this situation? There are legal ramifications to consider. I turned back to face my family, these people who shared my DNA, but had demonstrated that we shared nothing else that mattered. I want them to know exactly what they've lost, I said simply. Over the next hour, I laid out the consequences of their actions with the same methodical precision they had used to dismantle my life. Every fraudulent signature, every illegal transfer, every lie they had told, it was all documented, all actionable, all devastating to their futures. The restaurant is mine, and it always was, I explained. The house sale is void because I never died, which makes the death certificate fraud. The insurance claims you filed are criminal, and the money you've already spent? That needs to be returned immediately. But the legal consequences weren't the worst part of their punishment. The worst part was watching them realize that their greed had cost them something irreplaceable, any chance of a real relationship with me going forward. Charlotte, Jessica pleaded, we're family. We made mistakes, but we're still family. I looked at her, this woman who had been my maid of honor, who had helped me through my divorce, who had held my hand during our father's funeral. No, I said quietly. Family would have believed I could come back. Family would have protected what I built instead of trying to profit from it. Family would have loved me more than they loved my money. The meeting ended with Jonathan outlining the legal steps we would be taking to recover my assets and ensure that criminal charges were filed where appropriate. As my family filed out of the office, each of them broken in a different way, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not satisfaction, but sadness. I had won. But victory felt hollow when it meant acknowledging that the people I had loved most in the world had never really loved me back. 3 months later, I was back in my restaurant, Charlotte's Kitchen, preparing for the dinner rush. Isabella had done an amazing job keeping everything running, and the staff had welcomed me back like I was returning from a long vacation instead of from the dead. The legal proceedings were ongoing, but I had recovered most of my assets. More importantly, I had recovered my sense of self. The experience had taught me that sometimes the most valuable thing you can learn about people is what they do when they think you're not watching. As I stood in my kitchen, surrounded by the smells and sounds that had always been my sanctuary, I realized that being declared dead had given me something unexpected, a chance to be reborn. Not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. I had lost a family, but I had gained something more valuable. Clarity about who I really was and what I really wanted from life. The evening rush was starting, And through the kitchen window, I could see the Denver skyline lighting up against the darkening sky. It was beautiful, but more than that, it was mine to enjoy for however many years I had left. They had said I was dead, but I had been awake and listening. And now, finally, I was truly alive. If you've made it this far in my story, thank you for listening. Let me know in the comments what you think about second chances and family loyalty. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible true stories like this one. Sometimes the most unbelievable tales are the ones that actually happened.